Welcome to the Manufacturing Shakeup. We're your hosts, Ellen Feldman-Ornato
and Jenny Drescher. We're talking with dynamic women from across the manufacturing scene in Connecticut.
Hey, listeners. Have you heard the phrase, think globally, act locally? Some people even call it glocal. And it's a thing that's out in the world, but it's also a thing that happens for a lot of corporations here in Connecticut. So today we have Lee Ulinskas from ebm-papst, and she's going to be joining us to talk about building cultural engagement in a global company. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Ellen. Hi, Jenny. How are you?
It's great to have you with us today.
Great to have you.
I have to just check my impulse throughout this entire episode today because the name of your company makes me think about beer, and it is not a beer company.
It is not.
Real quick for context, can you just tell us what that is? Because I bet I'm not the only person that hears that name and goes, wait, Pabst? I thought that was in Wisconsin.
Blue ribbon. Right.
Yeah. And it's a common typo in a lot of communication to us. So we are the world leader in fan and motor technology. So not like the ceiling fan in your house or something you'd buy at Home Depot, but we're B2B. And in your everyday life, you probably interact with one of our products, whether a beverage cooler in a grocery store, or if you've used the internet, we have products in data centers. But we're kind of an unsung hero of manufacturing.
So all the little fans that go into all the many, many, many devices that we use everywhere we go.
Yes, where air is moving, hot or cold, we probably have a product for it.
Oh, hey, right here in Connecticut. We always love finding out those things.
Yes.
Right? Okay. The things that are in every part of our lives. So let me ask you a question. When we talked, it was really interesting that your company is owned by a global corporation and you are working at the local level here in Connecticut and Farmington to raise the vibration on cultural engagement. So yes. Like, what does that mean? What are you doing out there?
Well, we had kind of talked the other day in our prep call about, you have corporate culture, and that's kind of the vibe that you get, the feel when you're in the building, when you're working with your teams. But there's also these like microcosms of culture as well. There's feedback culture, there's being a learning culture. And my role, I get to kind of cultivate the right environment for those cultures to grow. And it's been a big shift. We have a ton of global support where that global approach, where we're thinking globally, what works for the entire organization, what level do we want the entire organization to be at, but then getting to take that local approach that works for our group here in Farmington. Is there something that works different for our group in Tennessee? And so we have a lot of flexibility on how we want to do our work.
What jumps out at me when I hear you talking about that, because we've worked with companies who are like yours. So on our other side of our lives, we run the Boulder company, which you probably know. And we hear this kinds of conversation over and over and over again from our podcast guests and from our clients about understanding the right fit for the right place. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that are like the one that pops into my mind is values. So what are the different kinds of values that are at work in the different locations that you've noticed are very, very different from one part of the company to another part of the company? Even within one site, it can be different. Yeah. What have you noticed? What have you learned about that?
Well, of course, we have some standard globally, we have some company values that are established. But it's interesting when we have international employees come and stay with us, there's some things that they noticeably point out. In a recent conversation, someone said, I don't know if it's American culture or just the culture of this location, but communication is very different. And so then we kind of have to think, well, so we communicate with each other in a very typical, whether it's American way or culture here in our little organization. But most of us have international colleagues that we talk to daily or weekly So are we using our perspective in those communications? Even when we talk to our group down in Tennessee, you have to know we're New England, we're fast. And maybe when we're talking to those in Tennessee, we have to focus on that connection first, talk about the weekend first, and build up to that status update that you need.
You mean because they don't all run around acting like a bunch of workaholic maniacs that
grabbing our Dunkin'.
that everything is the like the ultimate New York minute deadline, that they
Exactly.
actually live life at a reasonable pace. What a
Exactly.
radical concept. Yeah. And have you run into, I'm curious about in terms of the north-south dimension of that. We've worked with folks and spoken in places in like Louisiana and Alabama, and we have often found that we need to really modify our messaging and the way that we present certain ideas so that we can speak into the listening that is affected by the very big differences in culture between, say, Connecticut and Alabama. Like, what are some of those differences, and how do you support the people in your local Farmington office in being able to communicate well across those differences? How is that approached?
It's interesting because when we were originally just the Farmington location, and then of course regional salespeople, it was very easy to just get up and go and talk to somebody. You could have a department meeting, you would, maybe you're doing the Teams chat and the message is not clear, you get up and have the conversation. And now we don't have that with our Tennessee group. So it's finding the right time for an email, the right time for a Teams message. When does something need to be, is it better for me to speak to my peers down in Tennessee and have them operationalize the project because it needs that hand-on, like that hand-to-hand support that I can't provide from Farmington. So it's finding the right, like we said, the right approach for the right project.
Yeah. And also I have a question in terms of their ability or willingness to adapt. What do you notice about people when they, for example, when they're in Tennessee and they're working with the folks in Connecticut? At what is there a tipping point, you think, where it's like, I have to adapt to the majority culture, or, we have enough of us here now, a critical mass, and we have our own way of doing things, and it's more of a, an account adapting to each other?
There's a lot more collaboration required. And of course, some people have to make consolations. But we have been in Farmington for over 40 years, and Tennessee is only about 5 years old. So we have some old ways of doing things that need to bend to new ways of doing things. And then, of course, there's also the German manufacturing mentality that comes into play too. So it's really a delicate balance of finding, is it going to be old school? Is it going to be new school? When do we need to get Germany involved? But again, because we have created this very strong feedback and communication culture, we will be open to ideas and we will listen to what others have to say.
That's so funny. You mentioned one of our favorite words, which is collaboration, because it's honestly one of the hardest things for humans to do, right? It's one of those lifelong skills that we all strive for. Oh, I can do this because, we get, there's not a person alive that doesn't have the thing in their head that says, I want to be right, or I want to do it my way, or any of those things. It's just very human. And it can lead to a lot of tension and friction and push-pull, things like playing the blame game, or saying, I'm going to take all my cookies and I'm going to run away, and I'm just not even going to deal with you. I'm just going to avoid you altogether. I mean, these are very natural human responses. What do you think has been effective to help you in reaching through some of those difficulties with employees when they're feeling like that, when they're feeling like it's their fault and they're pointing fingers, or they're trying to take their cookies and run away? What's worked well for you from a HR perspective or a culture builder perspective?
Yeah, I think the mentality that we need to start having is we are very focused on our external customers, the people who buy our product, obviously, or else we wouldn't be here. But we also need to look at each other as customers.
Mm.
So my customers are all of our employees. I'm here to serve them. I'm here to create an experience for them. But if we have, customer service looking at the warehouse as each other's customers, how can we both help each other succeed? How can we both help each other get what we need? It takes the adversarial relationship out of it. It takes that blame out of it.
Mhm.
We're all moving together towards the same goal. And, just kind of trying to put yourself in that person's perspective, trying to understand what it is where the disconnect is. We're all using the same program, but we have different access and different screens. So maybe they just don't see what you see.
Mhm.
Um, and I think just taking a step back and asking questions, and you hear the word curiosity a lot
I was
now.
just going to say that.
Yeah, just approaching everything with curiosity rather than, that is wrong.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we're all here to help each other succeed. The company does not succeed unless we're on the same team.
Yeah. I have a question before actually at the beginning, you mentioned that something about creating a learning culture. So like, what does that mean? What does it look like inside of an organization to develop and build a learning culture?
Some of it is something like just creating a learning management system. So, an actual portal where you have trainings. So, it's not one person standing in front of three people doing the same training over and over and over again.
Mhm.
It's cross training. We have people who've been with the organization for 30 years. So, there's a lot of that institutional knowledge that we
Yeah.
don't want to lose. So making sure that the next generation is learning all of that historical, really important stuff that explains why we are doing what we're doing right now.
Mhm.
And then being open to new perspectives and new mentalities to find the best way to do things now.
Mm. I love the intentionality. Like it sounds like you as an individual are landing with me as a very intentional, a very purposeful person. Like you really slow down and think things through. And it's really a joy to hear that and to hear the stories about how you and your company are making that work, because one of the pressures, as we all know, our audience, our friends out in listener land live this daily is the pressure of getting things done on time and getting everything to market and deadlines, and just the high pressure, high stakes game that manufacturing tends to be can make it really hard to step back. We like to call this in our world, and we call it slowing down to speed up, because that's really what it is. But it sounds like there are some very intentional ways that you've done that have led to very strong results. One of the things that I'm curious about is how have you taken this values driven approach and translated it in your own, like from your wise point of view into the wise point of view of the people you work with? Like how have you modeled that for people, and now you see them modeling it, what it means to be values driven?
The nice thing about having very defined values and expectations for behavior is that I use it as a framework of where I'm going. So I might have a really great idea and I can look and go, does that fall into what our values are at this point? Is it a right now project? Is it a later project? Is it coming from what I personally want to do? That's something that I'm really excited about,
Mhm.
or is it an actual need of the organization? Because I mean, I can come up with idea after idea after idea. But if we're not getting that feedback from check-ins, stay interviews, onboarding check-ins, exit interviews, then it might not be something the organization needs. And then I'm
Mhm.
really wasting my time and the company's time.
Yeah, you could go down all the rabbit
Yeah.
holes, right?
Exactly.
All of them.
So I'm wondering if you think about like an initiative that you've started that was aligned with the company's values, and you think about you got to the finish line with it, and felt great about it. What are the skills that you brought forward to make that project go well? what I'm trying to pull out here, Lee, is like, what are the super skills, superpowers that you bring to the work that you do that you think would be of benefit to the people listening to this in terms of driving cultural success within their organization?
Yeah, I think it could be really helpful to have an understanding of what other departments need. I didn't start in HR, I started in customer relations, and I had the opportunity to work closely with engineering and the warehouse. So you kind of start to understand what their day to day is like. So then when I moved to HR, I was able to bring that perspective into my work. Because if
Mhm.
I'm working on a project, I'm obviously the expert. To me, it seems normal. Yeah, that's a super easy HR tech website to use because
Right.
I'm in it 6 hours a day. So bringing that the ability to take someone else's perspective uh,
Mm.
is very important. Of course, there's the project management part of it, moving all the pieces and when to get finance involved, who needs to be the senior sponsor on it, who's doing the training, very important. And then and you have to bring enthusiasm. No one's going to believe in your project if you're kind of like, we're doing this because we have to. You
Mm.
really have to bring that, like, what's in it for me
Yep.
to everybody in the organization.
Yeah, nobody ever gave an enthusiastic hell yeah to a meh
Yeah,
project.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what I hear is you're taking the global approach to your local setting, right? You're thinking globally about the organization and then honing it, getting executive support, and then making it locally appropriate.
Right. We have a product we use and it gives the opportunity to have asynchronous check-ins with your manager, which is really great in our dynamic workforce because you don't have to be in the same place, same time for a meeting. Um, and we started with everyone doing it every other week. And then some teams were like, no, this is too much. So we have teams doing it weekly. We have every other week. We have monthly. So giving that flexibility and again, that sort of miniature local approach
Mhm.
makes it an efficient and beneficial product for everybody to use.
Mm.
So everyone's getting feedback, but it varies based on their flexibility and what
Yep.
works for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that I love the idea of this sort of asynchronous check-in and using that's a really smart use of technology
Yeah.
because you can really use it as a way to be more efficient and keep notes between individuals, but you can also use it as a constant pulse check about the quality of your relationship, the quality of how are we communicating about our projects. What are we being in cooperation and collaboration with each other? Are we being like, is there tension? Is there adversarial language or tone going on in that dynamic? So just having an actual way to sort of track that seems like it has many uses.
And it's a balance of status updates, like actual work stuff, but also what's going well, what your challenges are. And then we have some rotation questions that are like, what training do you need? Who in the organization would you like to connect with? So it's this mix of water cooler and status update, and we're trying to kind of flow between them.
Mm.
Mm.
We can connect with our people.
I
I
love
love that.
that.
And for managers, because so often we hear from managers and supervisors, I have to do my job and I have to provide feedback. They can actually batch that work for themselves. I'm going to sit down and asynchronously do my whole team right now and then go back to something else versus like I have to schedule a check-in and it's got right. Because that whole thing of like, how do I work in this essential piece of being a manager and still manage the projects?
Right. And we
Right.
don't have a single manager who is not a player coach. So they're very busy with their full-time job,
Exactly.
supporting
Great
their
way to
team,
describe it.
managing the work. And this
Mhm.
is just an easy way for them to get some data and a pulse check on their team.
Love it.
Fantastic.
Love it. Wow. I have about a million shakeup factors today
Okay.
from this conversation. So, shakeup factor number one, friends, and I really think that this one gets a lot of lip service, but we all need to practice it a whole lot more. I know I do, is to really stay tuned into this notion that everyone is a customer inside of our teams. Everyone is a customer. Shakeup factor two is if you've got values scattered on the wall and you're wondering, golly, how would I actually live those values? How do I bring those values to life in my team and inside my org? Maybe you can do what Lee and her team have done, and which is to really look at this as a framework for thinking and saying, how does the choice or the idea that's in my head right now align with that value that's on the wall on that poster? Shake-up factor number 3, I'm going to say, is perspective taking. Perspective taking is probably one of the number one things that we can do to foster collaboration, and they're just living proof of it in the way that they're doing things at ebm-papst. And all right, shake-up 4, bonus shake-up factor today is this asynchronous check-in. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Bonus one. So yeah, asynchronous check-ins. What could you do inside your organization? Even without a software, my friends, you could set up a methodology for that where you do it on Teams if you're a Teams company, or you do it on your Slack or whatever your standard communication process is. So try these things on, go out, splash it all over social media. Let us know what you tried on and how it worked, and give a shout out to Lee and say, hey, thanks for giving me that hot tip. Appreciate it. So Lee Ulinskas, it's been such a pleasure to have you. We've learned so much from you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Pleasure talking with you. The Manufacturing Shakeup is sponsored by the Connecticut Office of Manufacturing, produced by Maselli Productions and Gale Communications, and hosted by the Boulder Company.